Rebecca sat in the cold courtroom, her hands gripping the wooden armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. She watched in disbelief as her husband of 8 years, Alexander, walked through the heavy oak doors with another woman by his side. The woman wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, her blonde hair swept back in an elegant bun, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never lost anything important in her life. The worst part wasn't seeing them together. Rebecca had prepared herself for that. The worst part was watching Alexander lean over to whisper something in the woman's ear, causing her to smile softly before squeezing his hand in what looked like a gesture of support. Here, in the place where their marriage would officially end, he had brought his affair partner as his cheerleader. Mrs. Johnson? Her lawyer, Patricia, touched her arm gently. Are you ready? Rebecca nodded, though she felt anything but ready. 6 months ago, she had been planning their anniversary dinner. Now she was sitting across from Alexander in a divorce court, watching him hold hands with the woman who had destroyed their marriage. It had started with a forgotten phone. 3 months earlier, Rebecca had been rushing to get ready for work when she noticed Alexander's phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. He had already left for his morning run, and she could see through the window that he was at the end of their street, still moving away from the house. The phone kept buzzing with text messages, and Rebecca glanced at the screen without thinking. The messages were from someone named Veronica. Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. I bought something special for you to unwrap. Tell me you love me. Rebecca's coffee mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the kitchen floor. She stood there, staring at the broken pieces, feeling like her world had just done the same thing. Her first instinct was to convince herself there was an explanation. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone had the wrong number. Maybe Alexander had a client named Veronica who was just very unprofessional. But deep down she knew. She had known for months that something was wrong. The late nights at the office had become more frequent. The business trips that seemed to multiply. The way Alexander would take his phone with him everywhere, even to the bathroom. The way he had stopped looking at her the way he used to, stopped touching her the way he used to, stopped talking to her about anything that mattered. She had ignored all the signs because she loved him. Because she had given up her own dreams to support his. Because she had spent 8 years building a life with him, and the thought of starting over was terrifying. But now, sitting in this courtroom watching him comfort another woman while their marriage was being legally dissolved, Rebecca felt something she had never felt before. Not just hurt. Not just anger. Something colder and more focused. She felt the need for justice. Alexander caught her eye from across the room and had the audacity to look sad. As if he were the victim here. As if he hadn't been the one sneaking around for months, lying to her face every single day. As if he hadn't been the one who had hired the most expensive divorce lawyer in the city to make sure she got as little as possible from their split. He's trying to claim the house was mostly funded by his inheritance, Patricia had explained during their last meeting. And he's saying you didn't contribute to the marriage financially since you stopped working to support his career. Rebecca had laughed bitterly at that. She had given up her job at the marketing firm to help Alexander through law school. She had worked part-time jobs to pay their bills while he studied. She had been the one to encourage him when he wanted to quit, the one to celebrate with him when he finally passed the bar exam, the one to help him network and build his practice. And now he wanted to pretend she had been nothing but a burden. Your Honor, Alexander's lawyer began, my client has been very generous in his settlement offer. Mrs. Johnson has no children to support, and she's young enough to rebuild her career. The house was purchased primarily with Mr. Johnson's family money, and he's already agreed to pay temporary alimony. Rebecca watched Alexander nod along with his lawyer's words, as if he were being reasonable. As if offering her scraps from the life they had built together was some kind of favor. That's when she saw Veronica reach over and give Alexander's hand another supportive squeeze. And that's when Rebecca realized she wasn't going to just let this happen. She had spent the last 3 months gathering evidence. She had hired a private investigator. She had gone through their financial records with a fine-tooth comb. She had discovered things about Alexander that would have shocked her 6 months ago, but now just made her more determined to make sure he didn't get away with destroying their marriage and then profiting from it. But most importantly, she had found out something very interesting about Veronica. Something that was going to change everything. Your Honor, Patricia stood up, we'd like to call our first witness. Alexander looked confused. They had agreed that this would be a simple proceeding, mostly just paperwork and financial arrangements. He hadn't expected Rebecca to call witnesses. We call Marcus Thompson to the stand. Rebecca watched as a tall, dark-haired man entered the courtroom. He looked nervous, uncomfortable, but determined. Alexander's face went pale, and for the first time since this whole process began, Rebecca saw fear in his eyes. Veronica, meanwhile, had gone completely white. She was staring at the man walking toward the witness stand with an expression of pure terror. Because Marcus Thompson was Veronica's husband. And until 3 days ago, he had no idea his wife was having an affair. 8 years earlier, Rebecca had believed in fairy tales. She had met Alexander at a coffee shop near the university, where she was finishing her master's degree in marketing and he was struggling through his first year of law school. He had been sitting alone at a corner table, surrounded by thick textbooks and empty coffee cups, running his hands through his dark hair in frustration. "Rough day?" she had asked, sliding into the seat across from him. Alexander had looked up with tired brown eyes and given her a smile that made her heart skip. "Rough semester. Rough year. Rough life choice, probably." They had talked for 3 hours. About his dreams of becoming a lawyer, about her plans to work in advertising, about books and movies and the small town where they had both grown up. By the time the coffee shop closed, Rebecca was completely smitten. "I'm not usually good at this," Alexander had said as they walked to their cars. "Talking to beautiful women, I mean. I'm usually too focused on studying." "Well, you're pretty good at it," Rebecca had replied, and she had meant it. He was charming and funny and ambitious. He had goals and dreams and a plan for his future. After dating a series of guys who seemed to drift through life without purpose, Alexander felt like a breath of fresh air. Their courtship had been like something out of a romantic movie. He would leave little notes in her textbooks when they studied together. He would bring her flowers for no reason. He would call her late at night just to hear her voice. When he finally told her he loved her, 6 months after that first meeting, Rebecca felt like the luckiest woman in the world. "I want to build a life with you," he had said, holding her hands in his apartment. "I want to be the kind of man who deserves you." And for a while he had been. They had moved in together during his second year of law school. Rebecca had gotten a job at a small marketing firm, and she used her salary to pay most of their bills while Alexander focused on his studies. It wasn't easy. Law school was expensive, and money was tight, but they were happy. They would spend evenings cooking dinner together, studying side by side at their small kitchen table, talking about the house they would buy someday and the trips they would take once Alexander was making lawyer money. "I'm going to pay you back for all of this," Alexander would tell her when she paid another tuition bill or covered another month of rent. "Once I'm working, you can quit your job and do whatever you want. Start your own agency. Write that book you're always talking about. Whatever makes you happy." Rebecca had believed him. She had loved him enough to put her own dreams on hold, to take a job that paid the bills instead of pursuing the creative positions she really wanted. She had been willing to sacrifice because she thought they were building something together. The proposal had come during his 3rd year of law school. Alexander had planned an elaborate evening dinner at the restaurant where they had their first official date, followed by a walk through the park where they had spent so many afternoons studying. He had gotten down on one knee under their favorite tree and pulled out a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "Rebecca, you've been my partner in everything," he had said, tears in his eyes. "You've supported me and believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you've made me." The wedding had been small but perfect. Rebecca's family had flown in from across the country, and Alexander's parents had welcomed her like she was already their daughter. They had written their own vows, promising to support each other's dreams and build a life based on mutual respect and love. For the first few years of their marriage, it had felt like they were keeping those promises. Alexander had gotten a job at a prestigious law firm, and Rebecca had been able to quit her stressful job and freelance while she figured out what she really wanted to do with her life. They had bought a house in a nice neighborhood, the kind of place where they could imagine raising children someday. They had taken vacations to Europe and gone on weekend trips to the mountains. They had hosted dinner parties and game nights with friends. Rebecca had been proud of the life they had built. Alexander was successful and respected, and she had played a part in that success. She had been the one to proofread his briefs, to help him prepare for important presentations, to network with the wives of his colleagues. She had been his partner in the truest sense of the word. But somewhere along the way things had started to change. It happened gradually, so slowly that Rebecca hadn't noticed at first. Alexander started working later. He started traveling more. He started coming home distracted and tired, more interested in unwinding with a drink than in talking about their days. He started keeping his phone face down on the table during dinner, and he started taking calls in the other room. "It's just work," he would say when Rebecca asked about his long hours. "I'm trying to make partner. You know how important this is." Rebecca had understood. She had always understood. She had been understanding when he missed their anniversary dinner because of a client emergency. She had been understanding when he had to cancel their vacation because of a big case. She had been understanding when he started working weekends and coming home too tired to do anything but collapse on the couch. She had been understanding even when he started seeming like a stranger. The man who had once left her love notes had stopped writing her cards on her birthday. The man who had once called her just to hear her voice had stopped asking about her day. The man who had once told her she was beautiful every morning had stopped looking at her at all. Rebecca had tried to talk to him about it. She had suggested counseling, date nights, weekend getaways. She had asked if he was happy, if there was anything she could do to help, if he was feeling overwhelmed. "I'm fine," Alexander had always said. "Everything's fine. I'm just busy." But everything wasn't fine. Rebecca had known it in her heart, even when she couldn't prove it. She had known it when he started showering as soon as he got home from work. She had known it when he started doing his own laundry. She had known it when he stopped wanting to be intimate with her, claiming he was too tired or too stressed. She had known it, but she had chosen to ignore it. Because acknowledging it would have meant acknowledging that the man she had sacrificed everything for had become someone she didn't recognize. It would have meant admitting that the life she had built was falling apart. It would have meant starting over. So she had kept pretending everything was fine. She had kept making his favorite dinners and asking about his cases and supporting his career. She had kept believing that once he made partner, once the stress decreased, once they had more money and more time, things would go back to the way they used to be. She had kept believing in their fairy tale, even when it was obvious the story had changed. Until the morning she found his phone. Until she saw Veronica's messages. Until she realized that Alexander hadn't been working late at all. The messages went back 6 months. Rebecca sat on her kitchen floor, surrounded by the broken pieces of her coffee mug, scrolling through text after text between her husband and a woman named Veronica. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. "I miss you already," Alexander had written just 2 hours after leaving their bed that morning. "I wish you didn't have to go home to her," Veronica had replied. "Soon," Alexander had promised. "Just a few more months and we can be together for real." Rebecca felt like she was drowning. These weren't just casual messages between co-workers. These were the messages of two people who were deeply involved, who had been planning a future together while she had been obliviously making dinner and asking about his day. She scrolled further back, watching their relationship develop in real time. The first messages were professional discussions about cases, meeting times, work events. Then they became friendlier, more personal. Then flirtatious. "You look beautiful today," Alexander had written in March. "Stop, you're making me blush," Veronica had replied. "I wish I could take you to dinner somewhere nice instead of hiding in my office. Someday we won't have to hide." Rebecca's vision blurred with tears. March was when Alexander had started working late. March was when he had told her he was too busy for their weekly date nights. March was when he had started acting distant and distracted. March was when he had started falling in love with someone else. She found photos they had sent each other. Pictures of Veronica in expensive lingerie, pictures of Alexander in hotel rooms, pictures of them together at restaurants Rebecca didn't recognize. They looked happy. They looked like they were in love. They looked like Rebecca and Alexander had looked 8 years ago. "I need to tell her soon," Alexander had written just 2 weeks earlier. "Are you sure you're ready?" Veronica had asked. "I can't keep living this lie. She deserves to know the truth." But what if she makes things difficult? What if she tries to take everything? "She won't," Alexander had replied. "She's not like that. She'll be hurt, but she'll understand that we both just want to be happy." Rebecca almost laughed at that. Even in his betrayal, Alexander was still underestimating her. She heard his key in the front door and quickly placed his phone back on the counter, moving to the sink to clean up the broken coffee mug. She could hear him in the hallway, probably checking himself in the mirror, probably making sure he looked like a man who had been out for a run instead of a man who had been planning his wife's replacement. "Morning," he said, walking into the kitchen. He was barely breathing hard, which should have been another red flag. Alexander usually came back from his runs exhausted and sweating. This morning he looked like he had been out for a casual stroll. "Morning," Rebecca replied, her voice surprisingly steady. "Good run?" "Great," he said, grabbing his phone from the counter. "I'm going to shower and then head to the office. I have an early meeting." With Veronica, Rebecca thought. Another meeting in his office where they would probably discuss how to handle telling his naive wife that their marriage was over. "What happened to your coffee mug?" Alexander asked, noticing the broken pieces in the trash. "I dropped it," Rebecca said. "Clumsy morning, I guess." Alexander nodded and headed upstairs. Rebecca waited until she heard the shower running before grabbing her laptop and opening a new browser window. She needed to know who Veronica was. It didn't take long to find her. Veronica Chen was a senior associate at Alexander's law firm, specializing in corporate law. She was 32 years old, had graduated from Harvard Law School, and was considered one of the rising stars in the firm. She was also beautiful, with the kind of polished, professional look that Rebecca had never quite managed to achieve. But the most interesting thing about Veronica Chen was that she was married. Her husband was Marcus Thompson, a software engineer who worked for a tech startup downtown. They had been married for 5 years, and from their social media profiles they seemed happy. There were photos of them at various events, smiling and laughing together. Marcus posted frequently about his wife, calling her his brilliant, beautiful partner, and praising her achievements. He had no idea. Rebecca felt a strange mix of emotions as she looked at photos of Marcus and Veronica together. Part of her felt sorry for him, he was being betrayed just as she was. But part of her felt angry at Veronica for being willing to destroy 2 marriages for her own happiness. And part of her felt something else. Something that surprised her. She felt like she had just been handed a weapon. Over the next few days, Rebecca watched Alexander with new eyes. She noticed how he would smile at his phone when he thought she wasn't looking. She noticed how he would step outside to take certain calls. She noticed how he would come home from work with the scent of expensive perfume on his clothes. She started paying attention to his stories about his day, and she realized how many of them included Veronica. How Veronica had made an excellent point in a meeting. How Veronica had helped him with a difficult case. How Veronica was working late with him again. "She sounds like a wonderful colleague," Rebecca said one evening, watching Alexander's face carefully. "She is," he replied, and for just a moment, his expression softened in a way that made Rebecca's heart break all over again. She started going through their financial records, looking for evidence of the affair. She found charges at expensive restaurants during his supposed working lunches. She found hotel rooms booked during his business trips, rooms that were upgraded to suites and charged to his personal credit card. She found jewelry purchases that had never made it home to her. She found evidence that Alexander had been planning to leave her long before she found those text messages. 3 weeks after discovering the affair, Rebecca made a decision. She called in sick to her freelance job and drove to the coffee shop across the street from Alexander's office building. She ordered a latte and sat by the window waiting. At 12:30 she saw them. Alexander and Veronica walked out of the building together, and even from across the street, Rebecca could see that they were more than just colleagues. They walked close together, their hands brushing as they talked. When they reached the corner, Alexander put his hand on the small of Veronica's back to guide her across the street. Rebecca followed them to an upscale restaurant 3 blocks away. She watched through the window as they sat across from each other at a corner table, holding hands and talking intimately. She watched Alexander lean across the table to kiss Veronica's cheek. She watched Veronica laugh at something he said, the same way Rebecca used to laugh at his jokes. They looked like a couple celebrating something. That night, when Alexander came home, he told Rebecca he had eaten lunch at his desk. "Busy day?" she asked. "Crazy," he replied. "I barely had time to breathe." Rebecca nodded and smiled, and inside she felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. Alexander wasn't just having an affair. He was lying to her face every single day. He was planning to leave her while still pretending to be a loving husband. He was treating her like a fool. That night, while Alexander slept beside her, Rebecca made a decision. She wasn't going to confront him. She wasn't going to beg him to stay or try to fight for their marriage. She wasn't going to give him the chance to lie to her anymore. She was going to be smart about this. She was going to make sure that when their marriage ended, she got exactly what she deserved. And she was going to make sure that Alexander and Veronica paid for what they had done to her. And to Marcus. Rebecca spent 2 weeks planning her confrontation with Alexander. She wanted to be smart about it, strategic. She had learned enough about her husband over the past month to know that he was a master manipulator when he wanted to be. If she went in unprepared, he would find a way to turn everything around and make her doubt herself. She gathered evidence first. She took screenshots of the text messages she had found on his phone. She made copies of the financial records that showed his restaurant charges and hotel bookings. She even drove by some of the places where she had seen him with Veronica, taking photos of them together. She also did something else. She called a divorce lawyer. Patricia Martinez had been recommended by a friend who had gone through a difficult divorce the year before. She was tough, experienced, and had a reputation for getting her clients exactly what they deserved. When Rebecca showed up at her office with a folder full of evidence, Patricia's eyes had lit up. "This is very good work," Patricia had said, flipping through the documents. Your husband has been sloppy. We can use this. I don't just want a fair settlement, Rebecca had told her. I want him to pay for what he's done. Patricia had smiled. I think we can arrange that. Now, armed with legal advice and a plan, Rebecca felt ready to face Alexander. She waited until a Saturday morning when she knew they would have time to talk without interruption. Alexander was in his home office, probably texting with Veronica, when Rebecca knocked on the door. Do you have a minute? She asked. I need to talk to you about something. Alexander looked up from his phone, and Rebecca saw a flash of guilt cross his face before he covered it with a smile. Of course. What's up? Rebecca sat down across from his desk and pulled out her folder. I want to talk about Veronica. The color drained from Alexander's face. What about her? I want to talk about your affair with her. For a moment, Alexander just stared at her. Then he started to shake his head. Rebecca, I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, Rebecca said calmly. She pulled out her phone and showed him a screenshot of one of his text messages to Veronica. You left this on the kitchen counter 3 weeks ago. I saw everything. Alexander's hands were shaking as he reached for the phone. This isn't what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like, Rebecca replied. You're having an affair with a colleague. You've been having an affair for 6 months. You're in love with her and you're planning to leave me. Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down the phone and looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. It was cold, almost calculating. Okay, he said. You're right. I'm having an affair. Rebecca had expected him to keep denying it, to try to convince her she was imagining things. She hadn't expected him to admit it so easily. That's it? She asked. That's all you have to say? Alexander leaned back in his chair. What do you want me to say? I'm sorry? I'm sorry, Rebecca. I never meant for this to happen. But it did happen and I can't take it back. You can't take it back, Rebecca repeated. Like it was an accident. Like you accidentally started having an affair. It wasn't planned, Alexander said. These things just happen sometimes. People grow apart. People change. Rebecca felt anger building in her chest. People don't just grow apart, Alexander. You made a choice. You chose to start texting her. You chose to have lunch with her. You chose to kiss her. You chose to sleep with her. You chose to lie to me every single day for 6 months. You're right, Alexander said. I made choices, and I'm going to make another choice. I want a divorce. The words hit Rebecca like a physical blow, even though she had known they were coming. Hearing them out loud, in this room where they had planned their future together, made everything real in a way that the text messages hadn't. Just like that, she asked. 8 years of marriage and you want to throw it all away for someone you've known for 6 months? It's not about the time, Alexander said. It's about how I feel. I love her, Rebecca. I love her in a way that I haven't loved anyone in a long time. Rebecca felt like he had slapped her. What about me? What about the life we built together? What about the promises we made? People change, Alexander said again. I'm not the same person I was when we got married. You're not the same person either. We want different things now. What do I want that's so different? Rebecca asked. What have I ever wanted besides to be your wife and build a life with you? Alexander was quiet for a moment. Then he said, That's the problem, Rebecca. You gave up everything for me. You gave up your career, your dreams, your independence. You made me responsible for your happiness, and that's not fair. Rebecca stared at him in disbelief. I gave up those things because you asked me to. Because you told me you wanted to take care of me. Because you said we were a team. I know, Alexander said. And I'm grateful for everything you sacrificed. But I can't be responsible for your whole life anymore. I need to be with someone who has her own dreams, her own goals. Someone like Veronica, Rebecca said. Yes, Alexander replied. Someone like Veronica. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, Does she know you're going to divorce me? We've talked about it, Alexander said. She knows the situation is complicated. Does her husband know? Alexander's face went pale again. What? Does Marcus know that his wife is planning to leave him for you? How do you know about Marcus? Alexander asked. I know a lot of things, Rebecca said. I know that Veronica is married to a man who posts about her on social media like she's the love of his life. I know that she's been lying to him just as much as you've been lying to me. I know that you two are planning to destroy 2 marriages so you can be together. Alexander stood up from his desk. It's not like that. It's exactly like that, Rebecca said. You're both cheaters. You're both liars. And you're both about to find out that actions have consequences. What's that supposed to mean? Alexander asked. Rebecca stood up and headed for the door. It means I'm not going to make this easy for you. You want a divorce? Fine. But you're not going to walk away from this marriage with everything while I get nothing. You're not going to destroy my life and then ride off into the sunset with your new girlfriend. Rebecca, be reasonable, Alexander said. We can work this out like adults. I am being reasonable, Rebecca replied. I'm being very reasonable. I'm just not being a pushover anymore. She paused at the door and looked back at him. Oh, and Alexander? You might want to tell Veronica that her husband is going to find out about your affair very soon. I thought she should have a chance to prepare. Alexander's face went white. You wouldn't. I would, Rebecca said. I definitely would. Because Marcus deserves to know the truth just like I deserve to know the truth. And because if you two want to be together, you should have to deal with the consequences of your choices. She left Alexander sitting at his desk, staring after her in shock. That afternoon, Rebecca called Patricia Martinez. I confronted him, she said. He admitted everything. How did he react? Patricia asked. He tried to blame me for giving up my career. He said I made him responsible for my happiness. Patricia made a sound of disgust. Classic. They cheat and then they blame their spouse for somehow forcing them to do it. Don't worry, Rebecca. We're going to make sure he pays for that attitude. There's something else, Rebecca said. I want to contact the other woman's husband. I want him to know what's going on. That's your choice, Patricia said. But be careful. Make sure you have solid evidence before you reach out to him. You don't want to open yourself up to any legal issues. Rebecca smiled. I have plenty of evidence. And I have a feeling Marcus Thompson is going to be very interested in what I have to tell him. Rebecca spent the next month building the strongest case possible. She wasn't just preparing for a divorce, she was preparing for war. Patricia had given her a list of things to document and evidence to gather. Rebecca threw herself into the task with the same dedication she had once put into supporting Alexander's career. The difference was that now she was fighting for herself. She started by organizing all the financial documents she had gathered. The hotel charges, the restaurant bills, the jewelry purchases, everything that showed Alexander had been spending their money on his affair. She created a detailed spreadsheet that tracked every suspicious expense over the past 6 months. This is excellent work, Patricia said when Rebecca brought her the documents. He's been very sloppy with his spending. Look at this, he charged a weekend at the Ritz-Carlton to his personal credit card the same weekend he told you he was at a legal conference in Chicago. Rebecca looked at the charge. That was our anniversary weekend. He said he had to work. Well, he was working on something, Patricia said dryly. But it wasn't a legal brief. Rebecca also hired a private investigator named James Rodriguez. James was a former police detective who specialized in cheating spouses, and he came highly recommended by Patricia's office. I need photographic evidence, Rebecca told him. I need proof that they're together, proof that this is a serious relationship, not just a one-time mistake. James had smiled grimly. Trust me, if they're as careless as you say they are, I'll get you everything you need. Within a week, James had provided Rebecca with a thick folder of photographs. Alexander and Veronica leaving work together. Alexander and Veronica having lunch at expensive restaurants. Alexander and Veronica walking hand in hand through the park. Alexander and Veronica kissing in the parking garage of their office building. But the most damning photos were the ones James had taken at a hotel downtown. Alexander and Veronica entering together. Alexander and Veronica leaving together the next morning. Time stamps on the photos showed they had spent the night. This was last Tuesday, James explained. The same day your husband told you he was working late on a brief. Rebecca stared at the photos. There was no ambiguity here, no way for Alexander to explain these away. He was clearly having a full-blown affair, and he was clearly lying to her about it. But Rebecca wasn't done. She also wanted to understand exactly what Alexander was planning to do with their assets. She suspected he had been preparing for this divorce longer than he had admitted. With Patricia's help, she subpoenaed Alexander's financial records. What they found was shocking. Over the past year, Alexander had been quietly moving money out of their joint accounts and into accounts that only he controlled. He had opened a new checking account at a different bank. He had moved his retirement savings into a different investment firm. He had even changed the beneficiary on his life insurance policy. He's been planning this for at least a year, Patricia said, reviewing the documents. This wasn't a sudden decision. This was a calculated plan to leave you with as little as possible. Rebecca felt sick. While she had been trying to save their marriage, Alexander had been systematically preparing to destroy it. "There's more," Patricia continued. "Look at this. He's been paying for an apartment downtown. The lease is in his name only, and he's been making payments for 3 months." Rebecca stared at the lease agreement. The apartment was in an expensive building near downtown, the kind of place young professionals lived when they wanted to be close to the nightlife. It was a 1-bedroom unit with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. "He's been paying for a love nest," Rebecca said, her voice flat with disbelief. "That's exactly what it is," Patricia agreed. "And he's been using marital assets to pay for it. This is going to look very bad for him in court." But the worst discovery was yet to come. Hidden in Alexander's personal files, Rebecca found a document that made her blood run cold. It was a draft of a post-nuptial agreement, dated 6 months ago, right around the time his affair with Veronica had started. The agreement was heavily weighted in Alexander's favor. It would have limited Rebecca's claim to their house, reduced her alimony to almost nothing, and given Alexander full control of his law practice and retirement accounts. At the bottom of the document was a note in Alexander's handwriting: "Have Rebecca sign before filing." "He was planning to trick me into signing away my rights," Rebecca told Patricia, her hands shaking with anger. "It looks that way," Patricia said grimly. "The timing is too convenient to be coincidental. He starts his affair, then drafts an agreement that would leave you with almost nothing, then starts moving assets into accounts you can't access. This is a pattern of deliberate financial planning." Rebecca felt like she was seeing her husband clearly for the first time. The man she had loved and supported for 8 years wasn't just cheating on her, he was actively trying to steal from her. "What's our next step?" she asked. "We fight," Patricia said. "We use all of this evidence to show that Alexander has been planning this divorce for months, that he's been having an affair, and that he's been trying to hide marital assets. We demand everything you're entitled to, and we make sure he pays for his deception." While Patricia worked on the legal strategy, Rebecca focused on the other part of her plan. She needed to contact Marcus Thompson. She had been thinking about Veronica's husband for weeks. She had seen his social media posts, his loving messages about his wife, his complete obliviousness to what was happening. Part of her felt sorry for him, he was being betrayed just as she was. But part of her was angry at him too, irrationally, for being so naive. Mostly though, she saw him as an opportunity. Rebecca knew that if Marcus found out about the affair, he would likely divorce Veronica. And if Veronica was going through her own messy divorce, she would be less available to support Alexander through his. It would also mean that Alexander and Veronica's dream of riding off into the sunset together would be complicated by 2 divorce proceedings, financial difficulties, and public humiliation. Rebecca spent several days crafting the perfect message to Marcus. She wanted to be clear and direct, but also sympathetic. She wanted to provide enough evidence to convince him, but not so much that he would think she was crazy or vindictive. Finally, she settled on a simple approach. She would reach out to him through LinkedIn, pretending to be someone who had information he needed to know. "Mr. Thompson," she wrote, "I don't know you personally, but I have information about your wife that I believe you should know. I'm going through a divorce myself, and I've discovered that my husband has been having an affair with your wife for the past 6 months. I have evidence if you're interested in seeing it. I know this is difficult to hear, but I thought you deserved to know the truth." She included her phone number and hit send before she could change her mind. Marcus called her within 2 hours. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked without preamble. "I'm afraid it's not," Rebecca replied. "I know this is shocking, but I have proof. Your wife and my husband worked together at Morrison, Klein & Associates. They've been having an affair since March." "That's impossible," Marcus said. "Veronica would never, she's not that kind of person." "I thought the same thing about my husband," Rebecca said gently. "But I have text messages, photos, financial records. I can show you everything." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I want to see the evidence." They met at a coffee shop the next day. Marcus looked exactly like his photos, tall, dark-haired, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. He looked like the type of man who would never suspect his wife of cheating because he would never cheat himself. Rebecca spread out the evidence on the table between them. The text messages, the photos, the hotel receipts. She watched Marcus's face as he processed what he was seeing. "This can't be real," he whispered, staring at a photo of Alexander and Veronica kissing. "I'm sorry," Rebecca said. "I know how you feel. I felt the same way when I found out." Marcus picked up one of the text messages, reading it carefully. "She told me she was working late on Tuesday. She said she had to review contracts. She was working late, Rebecca said. Just not on contracts. Marcus was quiet for a long time, studying the evidence. Finally, he looked up at Rebecca. Why are you showing me this? What do you want? Rebecca had been prepared for this question. I want the truth to come out. I want my husband and your wife to face the consequences of their actions. I want them to know that they can't just destroy 2 marriages without any repercussions. You want revenge, Marcus said. I want justice, Rebecca corrected. There's a difference. Marcus gathered up the photos and documents. Can I keep these? Those are copies, Rebecca said. Keep them. Do whatever you think is right. As Marcus left the coffee shop, Rebecca felt a mix of emotions. She felt guilty for being the one to destroy his world. She felt satisfied that Veronica would finally face consequences for her actions. And she felt something else, a sense of partnership with Marcus, a feeling that they were both fighting against the same people who had wronged them. She had no idea that this feeling would become very important in the months to come. 2 days later, Alexander came home looking shaken. We need to talk, he said. About what? Rebecca asked, though she had a pretty good idea. Veronica's husband found out about us, Alexander said. He's filing for divorce. Rebecca tried to look surprised. Oh no. How did he find out? Someone sent him evidence, Alexander said, studying Rebecca's face carefully. Photos, text messages, financial records. Professional stuff like it was put together by a private investigator. That's terrible, Rebecca said. Do you think it was someone from your office? Alexander was quiet for a moment. Then he said, It was you, wasn't it? Rebecca met his eyes steadily. I told you actions have consequences. You destroyed her marriage, Alexander said angrily. I didn't destroy her marriage, Rebecca replied. She destroyed her marriage when she decided to have an affair with you. I just made sure her husband knew the truth. You're being vindictive, Alexander said. I'm being honest, Rebecca corrected. Something you might want to try sometime. Alexander stared at her for a long moment. Then he said, This changes everything. Veronica is going to need time to deal with her divorce. We're going to have to wait before we can be together. What a shame, Rebecca said. It's almost like there are real consequences for breaking up 2 marriages. You're going to regret this, Alexander said. I was going to be reasonable about our divorce, but now I'm going to fight for everything. Rebecca smiled. Good. I was hoping you'd say that. Why? Alexander asked, confused. Because I've been preparing for a fight, Rebecca said. And I'm going to win. The first court appearance was scheduled for a rainy Tuesday morning in November. Rebecca arrived early, wearing a conservative navy suit that Patricia had helped her choose. She wanted to look professional, sympathetic, and credible, the picture of a wronged wife who deserved justice. Alexander arrived 15 minutes later with his lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Robert Klein who had a reputation for being ruthless in divorce cases. Rebecca wasn't surprised that Alexander had hired expensive representation. He had always believed that money could solve any problem. What did surprise her was that Veronica was there too. She sat in the back of the courtroom, wearing a black dress that made her look like she was attending a funeral. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. When she saw Rebecca, her face flushed with anger. Your Honor, Robert Klein began, my client is here today seeking a fair and equitable dissolution of his marriage to Rebecca Johnson. Mr. Johnson has been more than generous in his settlement offer, and we hope to resolve this matter quickly and amicably. Patricia stood up. Your Honor, Mrs. Johnson is here today seeking what she is rightfully owed after 8 years of marriage, during which she sacrificed her career to support her husband's professional ambitions. We believe Mr. Johnson's settlement offer is inadequate and fails to account for Mrs. Johnson's contributions to their marital assets. The judge, a stern-looking woman named Judge Patricia Williams, reviewed the paperwork in front of her. I see that there are significant assets involved in this case. Mr. Klein, can you outline your client's position? Robert Klein pulled out a folder. Your Honor, my client has offered Mrs. Johnson temporary alimony of $3,000 per month for 2 years, along with $50,000 in cash and her personal vehicle. He is willing to assume responsibility for all marital debts. Given that Mrs. Johnson has no children to support and is still young enough to rebuild her career, we believe this is a fair offer. Rebecca felt her jaw clench. The house they had bought together was worth $400,000. Alexander's law practice was worth at least $200,000. Their retirement accounts contained another $150,000. He was offering her scraps while keeping everything of value for himself. Mrs. Martinez, Judge Williams said, "What is your client's position?" Patricia stood up with her own folder. "Your Honor, Mrs. Johnson is seeking an equitable division of all marital assets, including the family home, retirement accounts, and Mr. Johnson's law practice. She is also seeking permanent alimony of $5,000 per month, given that she sacrificed her career to support her husband's education and professional development." "That's outrageous," Robert Klein interrupted. "Mrs. Johnson contributed nothing to the financial success of the marriage. She worked part-time jobs and freelance work. She has no claim to my client's professional practice." "Mr. Klein," Judge Williams said sharply, "you'll have your chance to speak. Mrs. Martinez, please continue." "Thank you, Your Honor. Mrs. Johnson worked multiple jobs to support them both while Mr. Johnson attended law school. She sacrificed her own career opportunities to serve as his unpaid assistant, editor, and networking support. She is entitled to compensation for those contributions." Judge Williams made notes on her paperwork. "Are there any complicating factors in this case?" Patricia and Robert Klein exchanged glances. "Your Honor," Patricia said, "there are allegations of marital misconduct that may be relevant to the asset division." "What kind of misconduct?" Judge Williams asked. "Adultery," Patricia replied. "We have evidence that Mr. Johnson has been having an affair with a colleague for the past 6 months." The courtroom went completely silent. Rebecca could hear Veronica's sharp intake of breath from the back of the room. "Mr. Klein," Judge Williams said, "how does your client respond to these allegations?" Robert Klein looked uncomfortable. "Your Honor, my client's personal relationships are not relevant to the financial aspects of this divorce." "Actually, Mr. Klein, in this state, adultery can be a factor in asset division and alimony determinations," Judge Williams said. "Mrs. Martinez, what evidence do you have?" Patricia pulled out a thick folder. "Your Honor, we have text messages, photographs, financial records showing payments for hotel rooms and expensive dinners, and witness testimony. We can provide all of this evidence to the court." Judge Williams looked at Robert Klein. "Mr. Klein, I'm going to give you time to review this evidence and consult with your client. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks to discuss these allegations and their potential impact on the settlement." As the court session ended, Rebecca watched Alexander's face go pale. He had clearly expected this to be a simple proceeding, where he would offer her a minimal settlement and she would accept it gratefully. Instead, he was now facing the possibility that his affair would become public record, that his professional reputation would be damaged, and that he would have to pay significant alimony and asset division. "This is just the beginning," Patricia whispered to Rebecca as they gathered their papers. Outside the courtroom, Rebecca was surprised to see Marcus Thompson waiting by the elevators. He looked nervous but determined. "Rebecca," he said, "can I talk to you for a minute?" They walked to a quiet corner of the courthouse lobby. "I wanted to thank you," Marcus said, "for telling me the truth. I know it couldn't have been easy. How are you doing?" Rebecca asked. Marcus laughed bitterly. "Well, I'm getting divorced. Veronica moved out last week. She's staying with her sister while she looks for an apartment." He paused. "I heard what happened in there. Your husband's affair is going to become public record." "It already is public record," Rebecca said. "The moment he decided to cheat on me, it became everyone's business." "I've been thinking," Marcus said, "about what you said that day in the coffee shop. About justice versus revenge. What about it?" "I think you were right. This isn't about revenge. It's about making sure they face the consequences of their choices." Marcus took a deep breath. "I want to help you." Rebecca was surprised. "Help me how?" "I know things about Veronica. Financial things. Personal things. Things that might be useful in your divorce case." "What kind of things?" "Well, for starters, she's been lying to me about money for months. She told me she was saving for a vacation, but she was actually spending money on clothes and dinners with your husband. She's been charging things to credit cards that I didn't know about." Rebecca felt a spark of interest. "What else?" "She's been talking about quitting her job and starting her own practice. She's been meeting with clients on the side, trying to steal business from her current firm. If her bosses found out, she'd be fired immediately." This was interesting. If Veronica lost her job, she would be less able to support Alexander financially. It would also mean that their dream of building a life together would be much more difficult. "Are you sure about this?" Rebecca asked. "I'm sure," Marcus said. "I have emails, financial records, everything. She kept it all on our shared computer." Rebecca looked at Marcus more carefully. He had seemed like such a gentle, naive man when she first met him. But she was beginning to realize that he was smarter and more strategic than she had given him credit for. "Why are you willing to help me?" she asked. "Because they hurt both of us," Marcus said. "Because they thought they could lie and cheat and get away with it. Because they deserve to face consequences for what they've done." Rebecca thought about this. Having Marcus as an ally could be very useful. He had inside information about Veronica that could help her case against Alexander. And he had his own reasons for wanting to see both of them pay for their affair. "Okay," she said finally. "Let's work together." Marcus smiled for the first time since she had met him. "Good. I think we're going to make a great team." As they walked out of the courthouse together, Rebecca felt something she hadn't felt in months. Oh. For the first time since discovering Alexander's affair, she felt like she might actually win this fight. Behind them, she could see Alexander and Veronica through the courthouse windows, standing close together and talking intensely. They looked worried, stressed, and angry. They had no idea what was coming for them. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of investigation and preparation. Rebecca and Marcus had become unlikely allies, meeting regularly to share information and coordinate their strategies. They made an effective team. Rebecca's attention to detail combined with Marcus's insider knowledge of Veronica's secrets. "She's been planning this for a long time," Marcus told Rebecca during one of their coffee meetings. "Look at this." He showed her a series of emails between Veronica and a real estate agent, dated 3 months earlier. Veronica had been looking at expensive apartments in the city, the kind of places she couldn't afford on her salary alone. She was planning to move in with Alexander, Rebecca said, studying the emails. "That's not the worst part," Marcus continued. "Look at this email she sent to her sister." Rebecca read the email, her eyes widening. In it, Veronica had written, "I know the divorce is going to be messy, but Alexander says his wife is too dependent on him to fight for much. He thinks she'll take whatever he offers just to avoid conflict. Once we're together, we can afford the apartment we really want. She was counting on me being a pushover," Rebecca said, feeling anger bubble up in her chest. "They both were," Marcus agreed. "But there's more. She's been stealing clients from her firm." Marcus pulled out a folder full of documents. "I found these on her computer. She's been meeting with clients outside of work, trying to convince them to leave Morrison, Klein and Associates and come with her when she starts her own practice." Rebecca examined the documents. There were emails between Veronica and several major clients, offering them reduced rates if they would switch to her new firm. There were also financial projections showing how much money she expected to make once she had stolen these clients. "This is unethical," Rebecca said. "She could be disbarred for this." "Exactly," Marcus said. "She's been so focused on her affair with Alexander that she's been making stupid professional decisions. She thinks she's untouchable." Rebecca felt pieces of a larger plan falling into place. "What if we made sure her bosses found out about this?" "I was thinking the same thing," Marcus said. "If she loses her job, she won't be able to support Alexander financially during his divorce. It would also destroy her professional reputation." Rebecca studied Marcus's face. He had changed significantly since she had first met him. The gentle, naive man had been replaced by someone harder, more strategic. She realized that betrayal had transformed him just as it had transformed her. "There's something else," Marcus said. "Something bigger." "What?" "I've been going through our financial records more carefully and I found something interesting. Veronica has been receiving payments from a company called VRC Consulting for the past year." "What's VRC Consulting?" "That's what I wanted to find out," Marcus said. "So I did some digging. It turns out VRC Consulting is a shell company. It doesn't actually provide any services. It's just a way to move money around." Rebecca felt her pulse quicken. "Money from where?" "That's the million-dollar question," Marcus said. "But I have a theory. What if it's money from clients she's already stolen? What if she's been running her side business for longer than we thought?" This was huge. If Veronica had been stealing clients and running an unauthorized business while employed at Morrison, Klein and Associates, it would be grounds for immediate termination and possible criminal charges. "We need to find out more about VRC Consulting," Rebecca said. "I'm already on it," Marcus replied. "I have a friend who works in corporate investigations. He's going to help me trace the money." While Marcus worked on uncovering Veronica's business dealings, Rebecca focused on strengthening her own divorce case. Patricia had been busy building their argument, and the evidence was overwhelming. "We have him on adultery, hidden assets, and financial deception," Patricia explained during one of their meetings. "But I want to make sure we're prepared for whatever his lawyer throws at us." "What do you mean?" Robert Klein is known for playing dirty, Patricia said. He's going to try to attack your character, make you look like a gold digger or a vindictive ex-wife. We need to be ready for that. Rebecca thought about this. What can I do to prepare? First, we need character witnesses. People who can testify to your contributions to the marriage and your professional capabilities. Second, we need to document everything you gave up for Alexander's career. Third, we need to show that you're not being vindictive, you're just seeking what you're legally entitled to. Over the next week, Rebecca reached out to friends, former colleagues, and family members who could serve as character witnesses. She also gathered documentation of her professional sacrifices. Job offers she had turned down to support Alexander, freelance projects she had abandoned to help him with his cases, networking events she had attended on his behalf. The picture that emerged was of a woman who had systematically given up her own ambitions to support her husband's career, only to be betrayed and discarded when he no longer needed her support. This is powerful stuff, Patricia said, reviewing the documentation. Any reasonable judge will see that you're entitled to compensation for your contributions. But Rebecca wanted more than just financial compensation. She wanted Alexander and Veronica to pay for their deception and betrayal. That's when Marcus called her with the breakthrough they had been waiting for. I found it, he said, his voice excited. I know where the money is coming from. They met at their usual coffee shop, and Marcus spread out a series of financial documents on the table. VRC Consulting has been receiving payments from 3 major clients of Morrison, Klein and Associates, he explained. Clients that Veronica works with directly. Rebecca studied the numbers. She's been stealing from her own firm. Not just stealing, Marcus said. She's been running a sophisticated embezzlement scheme. She's been billing clients for work that she then does through her consulting company, essentially getting paid twice for the same work. How much money are we talking about? Over the past year? About $200,000. Rebecca felt her eyes widen. That's a serious crime. It gets worse, Marcus continued. Look at this. Some of the payments from VRC Consulting have been going directly to Alexander. Rebecca stared at the bank records Marcus was showing her. There were several payments from Veronica's consulting company to Alexander's personal account, totaling over $30,000. He's been taking money from her embezzlement scheme, Rebecca said. Which makes him an accessory to her crimes, Marcus said. He's not just cheating on you, he's helping her steal from their law firm. This was the evidence Rebecca had been hoping for. Not only could she prove that Alexander was having an affair, but she could also prove that he was involved in illegal financial activities with his affair partner. We need to take this to the police, Rebecca said. Already done, Marcus replied. I filed a report yesterday. They're opening an investigation. Rebecca felt a surge of satisfaction. Alexander had thought he was so clever, planning his exit strategy and moving assets around to minimize her settlement. But he had been stupid enough to get involved in Veronica's embezzlement scheme, which would now destroy both of their careers and possibly land them in prison. There's one more thing, Marcus said. The police want to talk to you. They want to know if you have any evidence of Alexander's involvement in the embezzlement. Rebecca smiled. I have plenty of evidence. Bank records, text messages, photos of them together at expensive restaurants that he couldn't afford on his lawyer's salary alone. Good, Marcus said. Because I think we're about to watch their whole world come crashing down. As they left the coffee shop, Rebecca felt a sense of anticipation she hadn't experienced in months. She had started this divorce thinking she would be lucky to get a fair settlement. Now she realized she might be watching Alexander and Veronica face criminal charges. Justice, she thought, was going to be very sweet. The second court hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning, and Rebecca arrived to find the courthouse buzzing with activity. Word had leaked about the embezzlement investigation, and several reporters were hanging around the courthouse steps. How are you feeling? Patricia asked as they walked through the lobby. Ready, Rebecca replied, and she meant it. She had been preparing for this moment for weeks, and she was confident in their case. Alexander looked significantly less confident. He sat at the defendant's table with Robert Klein, both of them looking grim. Veronica was notably absent from the courtroom, which Rebecca found interesting. Where's his cheering section? Rebecca whispered to Patricia. Probably trying to avoid being photographed, Patricia replied. I heard she's been suspended from her job pending the investigation. Judge Williams called the court to order and reviewed the files in front of her. I understand there have been some developments in this case since our last hearing? Robert Klein stood up. Your Honor, My client maintains that the allegations of adultery are irrelevant to the financial aspects of this divorce. He's prepared to offer a revised settlement that he believes is fair and equitable. Mr. Klein, Judge Williams said, before we discuss settlement offers, I need to address the elephant in the room. I understand that your client is currently under investigation for potential financial crimes. The courtroom went silent. Rebecca could see Alexander's face go pale. Your Honor, Robert Klein said carefully, my client has not been charged with any crimes. The investigation is ongoing, and he is cooperating fully with law enforcement. Mrs. Martinez, Judge Williams said, do you have evidence that these alleged crimes are relevant to the divorce proceedings? Patricia stood up with a thick folder. Yes, Your Honor. We have evidence that Mr. Johnson has been receiving payments from an illegal embezzlement scheme run by his affair partner. These payments constitute marital assets that he has been hiding from his wife. That's a serious allegation, Judge Williams said. What evidence do you have? Patricia began laying out the financial documents that Marcus had provided. Bank records showing payments from VRC Consulting to Alexander's personal account. Text messages between Alexander and Veronica discussing money. Photos of them at expensive restaurants and hotels that they couldn't afford on their legitimate salaries. Your Honor, Patricia continued, Mr. Johnson has not only been having an affair, but he has been using funds from his affair partner's embezzlement scheme to finance their relationship. This money belongs to his wife as part of their marital assets. Robert Klein looked stunned. Your Honor, my client had no knowledge of any embezzlement scheme. Any payments he received were legitimate consulting fees. Consulting fees for what? Judge Williams asked. Robert Klein looked at Alexander, who whispered something in his ear. Your Honor, my client occasionally provided legal advice to Ms. Chen's consulting business. What kind of legal advice? Judge Williams pressed. There was a long pause. Finally, Robert Klein said, my client will need to consult with his attorney regarding potential criminal charges before answering that question. Judge Williams raised her eyebrows. Mr. Klein, are you invoking the Fifth Amendment on behalf of your client? Yes, Your Honor. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Rebecca felt a surge of triumph. Alexander was essentially admitting that he had been involved in illegal activities by refusing to testify about them. This is highly unusual, Judge Williams said. Mr. Klein, your client is invoking constitutional protections in a civil divorce proceeding. This suggests that he believes his testimony could incriminate him in criminal activities. Your Honor, Robert Klein said, my client is simply being cautious while the investigation is ongoing. Mrs. Martinez, Judge Williams said, do you have any other evidence you'd like to present? Yes, Your Honor. We'd like to call a witness. Rebecca felt her heart skip a beat. This was the moment she had been waiting for. We call Marcus Thompson to the stand. The courtroom doors opened and Marcus walked in. He looked nervous but determined, dressed in a simple suit and tie. As he walked to the witness stand, Rebecca could see Alexander's face go white. Marcus was sworn in and took his seat. Mr. Thompson, Patricia began, what is your relationship to the parties in this case? I'm the husband of Veronica Chen, Marcus replied. She's been having an affair with Mr. Johnson. How do you know about this affair? Mrs. Johnson contacted me with evidence. Text messages, photos, financial records. She showed me proof that my wife and her husband had been lying to both of us for months. Patricia walked over to the evidence table. Mr. Thompson, I'm showing you what has been marked as Exhibit A. Can you identify this document? Marcus looked at the bank statement. This is a record of payments from my wife's consulting company to Mr. Johnson's personal account. How much money did your wife pay Mr. Johnson? Over $30,000 in the past 6 months. Did Mr. Johnson provide any services to earn this money? Marcus looked directly at Alexander. No. My wife was stealing money from her law firm and sharing it with Mr. Johnson to fund their affair. The courtroom was completely silent. Rebecca could see Alexander whispering urgently to his lawyer. Mr. Thompson, Patricia continued, how has this affair affected your marriage? It's destroyed it, Marcus said simply. My wife lied to me for months. She stole money from her job to spend on another man. She destroyed our relationship and our future together. What do you hope to achieve by testifying today? Marcus looked at Rebecca, then at Alexander. I want the truth to come out. I want people to know what they did to us. I want them to face consequences for their actions. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. No further questions. Robert Klein stood up for cross-examination. Mr. Thompson, Isn't it true that you're angry at my client for breaking up your marriage? Yes, Marcus said. I'm angry. Isn't it true that you're testifying today because you want revenge against Mr. Johnson? Marcus considered this for a moment. I'm testifying because I want justice. There's a difference. You've been working with Mrs. Johnson to gather evidence against my client, haven't you? Yes. We've been sharing information about our spouse's affair. So you're not an impartial witness. You're working with the plaintiff to build a case against my client. Marcus looked directly at Robert Klein. I'm working with Mrs. Johnson because we both deserve to know the truth about what our spouses have been doing. We both deserve to get what we're entitled to in our divorces. And we both deserve to see justice done. No further questions, Robert Klein said, sitting down heavily. Judge Williams looked at her notes. Mrs. Martinez, do you have any other witnesses? No, Your Honor. We believe the evidence speaks for itself. Mr. Klein, do you want to call any witnesses? Robert Klein looked at Alexander, who shook his head. No, Your Honor. Judge Williams reviewed her notes for several minutes. Finally, she looked up. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of marital misconduct I've seen in 20 years on the bench, she said. Mr. Johnson, you have admitted to having an affair by invoking the Fifth Amendment regarding your financial dealings with your affair partner. You have hidden assets from your wife, including money that appears to have been obtained through illegal means. You have systematically planned to leave your wife with minimal financial support after she sacrificed her career to support yours. Alexander looked like he wanted to disappear. Mrs. Johnson, Judge Williams continued, you are entitled to an equitable division of all marital assets, including the family home, retirement accounts, and a portion of your husband's law practice. You are also entitled to permanent alimony of $7,000 per month, given your sacrifices and your husband's misconduct. Rebecca felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. She had won. Not just a fair settlement, but a complete victory. Furthermore, Judge Williams said, I am ordering Mr. Johnson to pay Mrs. Johnson's legal fees and court costs. His conduct in this case has been reprehensible, and he should bear the financial burden of these proceedings. As the court session ended, Rebecca felt a sense of satisfaction she had never experienced before. She had fought for herself and won. She had refused to be a victim, and she had made Alexander pay for his betrayal. Outside the courthouse, Marcus was waiting for her. Congratulations, he said. You did it. We did it, Rebecca corrected. I couldn't have done this without your help. Marcus smiled. What happens now? Now we move on with our lives, Rebecca said. We start over. We build something better. As they walked down the courthouse steps together, Rebecca felt something she hadn't felt in months, hope for the future. 3 months after the divorce hearing, Rebecca was finally starting to feel like herself again. The house was officially hers, Alexander had moved out, and she was receiving her alimony payments on time. More importantly, she had started to rebuild her career and her sense of self-worth. The criminal investigation into Veronica's embezzlement scheme had moved quickly once the evidence was presented. Veronica had been arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. Alexander had been charged as an accessory after the fact, since he had knowingly received money from the illegal scheme. Rebecca had followed the case closely, partly for her own satisfaction and partly because she wanted to see justice done. The local newspapers had covered the story extensively, describing it as a tale of corporate greed and personal betrayal that had destroyed multiple families. Former rising star lawyer charged in embezzlement scheme, read one headline. Affair leads to criminal charges for 2 attorneys, read another. Rebecca had to admit that she felt a certain satisfaction seeing Alexander's name in the newspapers, not as a successful lawyer, but as a defendant in a criminal case. His career was essentially over. No law firm would hire him now, and his reputation in the legal community was destroyed. Veronica had it even worse. She had been fired from Morrison, Klein and Associates and was facing serious prison time. Her law license had been suspended, and she was being sued by her former firm for the money she had stolen. The expensive lifestyle she had been living was completely gone. Have you heard from Alexander at all? Patricia asked during one of their final meetings. Just through lawyers, Rebecca replied. He's been trying to get the alimony reduced, claiming that his criminal charges have affected his ability to work. How's that going for him? Not well, Rebecca said with a smile. The judge told his lawyer that Mr. Johnson's reduced income is a direct result of his own criminal conduct, and that he can't benefit from his illegal activities by reducing his support obligations. Patricia laughed. I love Judge Williams. She doesn't tolerate nonsense. Rebecca had also been following Marcus's divorce proceedings, which had concluded the month before. Veronica had been in no position to fight for assets, given her criminal charges and complete destruction of credibility. Marcus had received everything he asked for, including their house and most of their savings. "It's funny," Marcus had told Rebecca during one of their regular coffee meetings. "A year ago I thought Veronica was the perfect wife. I thought we had the perfect marriage. Now I realize I was living with a stranger." "How are you doing with all of it?" Rebecca asked. "Better than I expected," Marcus said. "At first I was angry all the time. Then I was sad. Now I'm just grateful that I found out the truth before we had children or before she stole even more money." Rebecca understood exactly what he meant. The anger and hurt were gradually being replaced by a sense of relief and freedom she hadn't expected. "I've been thinking about what you said that first day," Marcus continued. "About justice versus revenge. What about it?" "I think we got justice. They're both facing consequences for their actions. Their careers are destroyed, their reputations are ruined, and they're probably going to prison. But more than that, the truth came out. Everyone knows what they did." Rebecca nodded. "That's what I wanted. Not just for them to be punished, but for people to know that actions have consequences. That you can't just lie and cheat and steal and expect to get away with it." A week later, Rebecca received a phone call that surprised her. "Mrs. Johnson? This is Detective Sarah Martinez with the District Attorney's Office. We'd like to talk to you about testifying in the criminal case against your ex-husband and Veronica Chen." Rebecca had expected this call, but hearing it still made her heart race. "What do you need from me?" "We're building our case for trial, and your testimony would be very helpful. You were the one who uncovered much of the evidence, and you can speak to the impact their crimes had on the victims." "When would you need me to testify?" "The trial is scheduled to begin next month. We'd need you to be available for probably 2 days of testimony." Rebecca didn't hesitate. "I'll be there." The criminal trial was held in the same courthouse where her divorce had been finalized, but this time the stakes were much higher. Alexander and Veronica were facing years in prison if convicted. Rebecca testified on the second day of the trial. She walked through the evidence she had gathered, explaining how she had discovered the affair and the financial crimes that went along with it. The prosecutor asked her to describe the impact the crimes had had on her life. "They didn't just steal money," Rebecca said, looking directly at the jury. "They stole years of my life. They stole my trust, my security, my future. While I was working to support our marriage, my husband was planning to leave me with nothing. While I was being faithful and honest, he was lying to me every day." When the defense attorney cross-examined her, he tried to make her look vindictive and money-hungry. "Isn't it true that you initiated contact with Mr. Thompson specifically to build a case against my clients?" he asked. "I contacted Mr. Thompson because he deserved to know that his wife was cheating on him," Rebecca replied. "Just like I deserved to know that my husband was cheating on me." "But you worked together to gather evidence against my clients, didn't you?" "We worked together to uncover the truth," Rebecca said. "We found evidence of crimes that were actually happening. We didn't make anything up." "You wanted revenge against your ex-husband for leaving you, didn't you?" Rebecca looked at the defense attorney calmly. "I wanted justice. I wanted him to face consequences for his choices. I wanted the truth to come out. If you want to call that revenge, that's your choice. But I call it justice." Marcus testified the following day, describing how he had discovered Veronica's embezzlement scheme and her affair with Alexander. His testimony was powerful and emotional, and Rebecca could see that the jury was moved by his story. The trial lasted 2 weeks. When the verdict came back, both Alexander and Veronica were found guilty on all counts. Alexander was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution of $50,000. Veronica was sentenced to 5 years and ordered to pay restitution of $200,000. As the sentences were read, Rebecca felt a complex mix of emotions. She felt satisfied that justice had been done, but she also felt sad that it had come to this. The man she had once loved was going to prison because of choices he had made. But mostly she felt free. After the sentencing, Rebecca and Marcus walked out of the courthouse together. There were reporters waiting, but they ignored them and headed to their usual coffee shop. "So it's really over," Marcus said as they sat down with their drinks. "Finally," Rebecca replied. "How do you feel?" "Relieved," Marcus said. "Like I can finally move on with my life." Rebecca felt the same way. For almost a year, her life had been consumed by the divorce, the investigation, and the trials. Now she could finally focus on rebuilding her future. "What are you going to do now?" Marcus asked. "I'm thinking about starting my own business," Rebecca said. I've been freelancing, but I want to build something of my own. Something that can't be taken away from me. That sounds perfect, Marcus said. You've proven you can fight for what you want. I think you can build anything you set your mind to. As they talked, Rebecca realized that one of the unexpected gifts of this whole experience had been her friendship with Marcus. They had supported each other through the worst period of their lives, and they had emerged stronger and more confident. You know, she said, I never thanked you properly for everything you did. For testifying, for sharing evidence, for being there when I needed someone who understood what I was going through. You don't need to thank me, Marcus said. We helped each other. We made sure the truth came out. We made a good team, Rebecca said. We did, Marcus agreed. We really did. As they left the coffee shop, Rebecca felt like she was finally closing the door on the most difficult chapter of her life. Alexander and Veronica were going to prison. She had her settlement and her alimony. She had her house and her freedom. Most importantly, she had her self-respect back. She had fought for herself and won. She had refused to be a victim, and she had made sure that justice was done. And now, finally, she could start building the life she actually wanted. 1 year later, Rebecca stood in the office space she had just leased, looking out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Johnson Marketing Solutions was officially open for business, and she had already signed 3 major clients. The past year had been transformative in ways she never could have imagined. Not only had she rebuilt her career, but she had discovered strengths and capabilities she didn't know she possessed. The woman who had once been afraid to confront her cheating husband was now running her own business and making decisions that affected multiple clients and employees. It looks amazing, Marcus said, walking into the office with a bottle of champagne and a bouquet of flowers. Congratulations on the grand opening. Thank you, Rebecca said, accepting the gifts. I can't believe I actually did it. I can, Marcus said. After watching you take down Alexander and Veronica, I knew you could do anything you set your mind to. Rebecca smiled at the memory. Alexander was now 6 months into his prison sentence, and from what she had heard, he was not adjusting well to incarceration. Veronica was in a different facility serving her 5-year sentence. Their affair, which had once seemed so romantic and exciting to them, had cost them their freedom, their careers, and their futures. Have you heard anything about how they're doing? Marcus asked, as if reading her thoughts. Alexander's lawyer called last month, Rebecca said. Apparently he's been trying to get his sentence reduced for good behavior, but it's not going well. He's having trouble following rules when he's not the one making them. Marcus laughed. That sounds about right. What about Veronica? Last I heard, she was working in the prison library. Her sister told me she's been writing letters to legal organizations, trying to convince them that she was somehow a victim in all of this. A victim of what? Her own choices. According to her sister, she thinks Alexander manipulated her into the embezzlement scheme. She's trying to claim that she was in love and didn't know what she was doing. Marcus shook his head. Even in prison, she's still lying. She was stealing money long before she met Alexander. Rebecca had stopped following their cases closely. She had gotten the justice she wanted, and now she was focused on building her future rather than dwelling on the past. The business was thriving beyond her expectations. She had started with small local clients, but word of mouth had spread quickly. Companies were drawn to her attention to detail, her strategic thinking, and her reputation for getting results. Within 6 months, she had been able to hire 2 employees and move into a proper office space. I have something to tell you, Marcus said, looking slightly nervous. What is it? I've been seeing someone, he said. Her name is Lisa. She's a teacher at the elementary school near my house. Rebecca felt a surge of happiness for him. That's wonderful. How long has this been going on? About 3 months, Marcus said. I wanted to make sure it was serious before I told anyone. And is it serious? Marcus smiled. I think so. She's nothing like Veronica. She's honest, kind, and she actually likes spending time with me. Novel concept, right? Rebecca laughed. It shouldn't be novel, but I understand what you mean. Over the past year, she and Marcus had continued their friendship. They met for coffee regularly, attended each other's important events, and provided support when one of them was having a difficult day. It had been exactly the kind of friendship Rebecca needed during her recovery and rebuilding process. What about you? Marcus asked. Are you dating anyone? Rebecca hesitated. She had been seeing someone for the past 2 months, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to talk about it yet. Maybe, she said finally. Come on, Marcus said. I told you about Lisa. Spill. His name is David, Rebecca said. He's an architect. We met when I was working on a marketing campaign for a construction company. And he's wonderful, Rebecca said, feeling herself smile. He's creative, intelligent, and he actually listens when I talk. He's also been through his own divorce, so he understands what it's like to rebuild your life. How does it feel? Marcus asked. Dating again, I mean. Rebecca thought about this. Scary. Exciting. Different. With Alexander, I always felt like I was trying to be the person he wanted me to be. With David, I feel like I can just be myself. That's how I feel with Lisa, Marcus said. Like I don't have to pretend to be someone else. They were interrupted by a knock on the office door. Rebecca looked through the glass and saw David standing in the hallway, holding a large coffee and what looked like pastries from the bakery down the street. Speak of the devil, Rebecca said, going to let him in. I thought you might need fuel for your first day, David said, kissing her cheek. I brought enough for everyone. Rebecca introduced David to Marcus, and she was pleased to see that they seemed to like each other immediately. David was easygoing and genuinely interested in hearing about Marcus's work as a software engineer. Rebecca told me about everything you went through, David said to Marcus. It sounds like you two really supported each other through a difficult time. We did, Marcus said. Rebecca is tougher than she looks. She fought for what she deserved and won. David looked at Rebecca with admiration. I'm still amazed by everything she's accomplished. Building a business while going through a divorce and a criminal trial? That takes incredible strength. Rebecca felt herself blush. She still wasn't used to being seen as strong and capable, even though that's exactly what she had become. As the three of them sat in her new office, sharing pastries and talking about their plans for the future, Rebecca reflected on how much her life had changed. A year and a half ago, she had been a woman whose entire identity was wrapped up in being Alexander's wife. She had been afraid to make her own decisions, afraid to stand up for herself, afraid to imagine a life without him. Now she was a successful business owner, a loyal friend, and a woman who was slowly learning to trust and love again. She had discovered that she was stronger than she ever imagined, and that she could build a life that was entirely her own. I need to get going, Marcus said, checking his watch. I'm meeting Lisa for dinner, and I don't want to be late. Tell her I said hello, Rebecca said, hugging him goodbye. And thank you for coming to the opening. I wouldn't have missed it, Marcus said. You've come so far, Rebecca. I'm proud of you. After Marcus left, David helped Rebecca clean up the pastry crumbs and organize her desk for the next day. Are you happy? He asked, putting his arms around her. Rebecca considered the question. Was she happy? For so long, happiness had seemed like something that happened to other people, something that depended on external circumstances beyond her control. Yes, she said finally. I'm happy. Not because everything in my life is perfect, but because I'm finally living a life that's actually mine. I'm glad, David said. You deserve to be happy. As they left the office together, Rebecca took one last look around the space. Tomorrow she would come back and start building something new. She would meet with clients, develop marketing strategies, and continue growing her business. But tonight, she was going to have dinner with a man who respected her intelligence, valued her opinions, and made her laugh. She was going to go home to a house that was entirely hers, decorated with things she chose, filled with furniture she picked out. She was going to live the life she had always wanted but had been too afraid to imagine. Alexander had thought that leaving her would destroy her. He had counted on her being too dependent and afraid to fight for herself. He had expected her to accept whatever scraps he offered and disappear quietly from his life. Instead, she had fought back and won. She had exposed his crimes, destroyed his career, and sent him to prison. She had taken control of her own life and built something better than anything she had ever had with him. As she walked down the street with David, Rebecca felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not because she had gotten revenge on Alexander and Veronica, but because she had discovered who she really was underneath all the fear and self-doubt. She was stronger than she had ever imagined. She was smarter than anyone had given her credit for. She was capable of building a life that was entirely her own. And that, she realized, was the best revenge of all.